The headset crackled to life at 11:47 p.m., jolting Claire from her routine paperwork. A man's voice broke through the static, raw with panic and desperation. "There's fire! Oh God, please hurry! My kids are inside!" Claire's pen froze over her log sheet. The address he rattled off hit her like a punch to the chest, twisting her stomach into knots of ice-cold dread. Her own street, Maplewood Drive, the familiar dispatch center, suddenly felt claustrophobic. Her children's bedrooms were just 4 houses away from the place she was commanding crews toward. For one suffocating heartbeat, Claire couldn't breathe. "Units, respond to residential fire. 412 Maplewood Drive. Structure fully involved. Possible entrapment," she announced into her microphone, her voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. Her voice was steady and controlled. Her hands weren't. They trembled against the console like leaves in a storm. On the other end of the line, the caller's scream pierced through her headset. Behind his voice, she could hear faint, desperate cries, children calling for help. Her chest ached with a primal urge to rip off her headset and race home to see her own kids. But she couldn't. She was the voice between chaos and rescue, the lighthouse in the storm. If she abandoned her post, no one else would know what to do. "Stay with me, sir," she said firmly into the microphone. "You are not alone. Help is already on the way." Her throat burned as she pictured the familiar row of houses she knew by heart. One of them was hers, where her daughter's crayon drawings were still taped to the refrigerator and her son's muddy sneakers sat by the front door. The fire was devouring her street alive, and she had to choose duty over everything that mattered. The line went dead with a sharp click. Claire stared at the address glowing on her screen one more time and whispered into the empty air, "Please, not my house." When you're faced with an impossible choice, what would you do? Would you stay, help others, or would you run home to your own? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage. Claire Martinez was not the loudest voice in the downtown dispatch center. She was the steady presence who calmed storms, stitching orders into chaos. Her colleagues nicknamed her the Rock because when panic and terror poured in, she absorbed it all and transformed it into something solid that others could hold on to. At home, Claire was a different kind of steady. The mom who slipped notes into lunch boxes, stayed up patching costumes, and knew which child needed a pep talk and which needed firm boundaries. Balancing that life with the chaos of dispatch felt like walking a tightrope in a storm, held together by nothing stronger than thread. Earlier that evening, as she'd rushed from her car to the dispatch center, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, had waved from her front porch swing. "You work too hard, mija," the older woman had called out with genuine concern. "Don't forget to take care of yourself too." Claire had smiled and waved back, deflecting the worry with practiced ease. "If I don't take care of others, who will?" The words had rolled off her tongue automatically, a response she'd given countless times before. But now, hours later, as emergency calls flooded in from every corner of the city, Claire was about to discover the truth that buried in those words would be tested in ways she had never imagined possible. The radio on her console squawked to life with an update that made her blood run cold. "Dispatch, we're getting reports of children trapped inside the structure." Claire's heart hammered against her ribs as she reached for her microphone. "Engine 47, Truck 12, respond to 412 Maplewood Drive for structure fire with possible entrapment." Claire's voice cut through the static with professional precision. Even as her mind raced with personal tremor, her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up building layouts for hydrant locations. But all she could think about was her own neighborhood, her own street. 4 houses down from her front door, where her babysitter Maria was hopefully keeping her 3 children safely inside, away from the windows that would soon glow orange with reflected flames. Engine 47 on scene, came the cracking response. We've got heavy fire showing from the second floor, extending to the roof, establishing command. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The second floor. That's where bedrooms would be. That's where children would be sleeping when the fire started. She closed her eyes and forced herself to focus, to push down the crushing weight of proximity and personal fear. Copy Engine 47, Truck 12. What's your ETA? 2 minutes out, dispatch. 2 minutes in a house fire. 2 minutes could mean the difference between rescue and tragedy. Claire's palm was liquid sweat as she gripped the microphone. Her console lit up, call after call from neighbors. Each ring felt like a countdown to disaster. Dispatch, this is Battalion Chief Morrison, came a gruff voice through her headset. I need you to confirm this address. My GPS is acting up in this weather. Claire's heart lurched. She knew exactly where 412 Maplewood Drive was located. She could picture it perfectly in her mind's eye. The blue house with white shutters, the curved driveway that always collected autumn leaves, and the oak tree in the front yard that her own children had climbed countless times. 412 Maplewood Drive, she repeated, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. Blue house, white shutters, driveway curves to the left, large oak tree in front yard. Entry point should be the front door facing east. Copy that, dispatch. Your directions are spot on. Of course they were. She'd walked past that house 1,000 times. Had chatted with Mrs. Lopez about the Lopez children playing in that very driveway. The knowledge that should have been routine neighborhood familiarity now felt like a curse. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her. A text from Maria, her babysitter. Kids are okay, but worried. We can see smoke from Tommy's bedroom window. Are you coming home soon? Claire stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could she say? That she was literally dispatching firefighters to save children just houses away from her own? That every fiber of her being screamed at her to abandon her post and race home to hold her babies tight? Instead, she deleted the message without responding and turned back to her console. Engine 47, what's your status? She radioed. We're setting up for an interior attack, but visibility is near zero on the first floor. Smoke's banking down heavy. Claire bit her lip hard enough to taste copper. She knew that house layout better than any blueprint. The Lopezes had the same floor plan as half the house on the block, including her own. The Lopezes had the same floor plan as half the houses on the block, including her own. Ladder Company, this is dispatch, she said, making a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. Be advised, the kitchen entrance may provide better access to the stairwell. Back door faces the alley. There was a pause, then, copy dispatch, how do you know the layout? Claire's throat felt like a sandpaper. I live in the neighborhood. The weight of those words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the center could hear her transmissions. Everyone now knew that she was sending crews to save children practically in her own backyard, while her own children were close enough to see the flames from their bedroom windows. Dispatch, we've got access through the kitchen, came the update. Heading upstairs now. Claire closed her eyes and pressed her headset closer to her ear, as if she could somehow protect the radio waves. In her mind, she could see the narrow staircase, could picture exactly where the children's bedrooms would be located. Be advised, kids' rooms are likely northwest corner, second floor, she transmitted, drawing from her intimate knowledge of the neighborhood's cookie-cutter layouts. Her phone buzzed again with a text from Maria. Tom is asking why there are so many fire trucks. Should I tell them what's happening? This time, Claire's hand shook as he typed. Keep them away from windows. I'll explain everything when I get home. Even as she sent the message, she wondered when she could leave. How could she go when children's lives hung in the balance, and how could she stay when her own children needed her? Dispatch, we're getting heavy heat on the second floor, came a strained voice through the radio. Structure starting to compromise, we need to move fast. Claire's nail dug crescents into her palms. She forced herself to breathe, to think, to be the calm voice in the storm that everyone is counting on. Copy EMS, what's your staging location? EMS staged 1 block east, standing by for patients. 1 block east. That would put the ambulance practically in front of her own house. The irony that felt like a knife twist. Emergency vehicles stationed at her own front door to save someone else's children, while her own children watched from their bedroom windows. The radio crackled with urgent voices, confusion, and the sound of organized chaos that defined every major emergency response. But underneath it all, Claire could hear something that made her blood freeze. A faint sound that might have been crying, might have been the wind, or might have been the sound of children calling for help. Engine 47, report, she said into the microphone, her voice cutting through the static like a lifeline thrown into churning water. The response came back fragmented, broken by interference. We've got 1 out, but 2 still inside. Claire's pulse slammed against her eardrum. 2 children still trapped. 2 houses away from her own sleeping children. Her hand flew to the chest, as if she could hold her heart inside her ribcage. The radio exploded with overlapping voices as firefighters inside a burning house tried to coordinate their search and rescue efforts. Through the chaos, Claire could make out fragments of urgent communication. Visibility 0, heat intensifying, structural integrity failing. Command, this is interior crew, came a strained voice, accompanied by heavy breathing and the sound of rushing air. Smoke conditions are deteriorating rapidly, structures getting unstable. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice cut through the chatter, heavy with the weight of command decisions. All interior crews, prepare to evacuate. Repeat, prepare to evacuate structure. Claire's blood turned to ice water. She knew what this meant. They were about to abandon the search, standard protocol, when a building becomes too dangerous to firefighters to remain inside. 2 children were still trapped somewhere in that maze of smoke and flame, and the people trained to save them were about to retreat for their own safety. Her mind raced through the layout she knew by heart. The Lopez house, like her own, had been built in the 1980s with a standard suburban design. If the main staircase was compromised, there was still the small window in the back bedroom, the one that faced the alley, the one that looked out over the narrow strip of grass between houses. Claire's hand moved to her microphone before her rational mind could stop her. Interior crew, this is dispatch, she said, her voice cutting sharp through the static and confusion. Hold your position. Silence fell across the radio frequency like a held breath. Dispatch, did you copy our last transmission? Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice carried a note of confusion. We're pulling back due to the structural. I copy your transmission, but hold your position. Claire interrupted, her voice steady and authoritative in a way that surprised even her. There's a window on the west side of the structure, second floor. That's the back bedroom. That's where the children's room would be. Another pause, longer this time. She could picture the firefighters inside the burning house, weighing her words against their training, their experience, their own safety protocols. Dispatch, how can you be certain of the room layout? Claire closed her eyes, seeing her own children's bedroom in her mind, the same layout, the same builder, the same neighborhood plan that had been replicated dozens of times throughout Maplewood Drive. Because I live 4 houses down, she said simply. Same floor plan. The kids' room is in the northwest corner, and the window faces the alley. If you can reach that window. Copy dispatch. The voice belonged to Captain Williams, a veteran firefighter she'd worked with dozens of times. We trust your assessment. Moving to the west side. The next few minutes stretched like hours. Claire sat frozen at her console, her headset pressed so tightly to her ear that the plastic left indentations in her skin. Around her, the dispatch center had gone unusually quiet. All she heard was static punctuated by muffled sounds, breaking glass, shouting, and the whir of power tools. Then, breaking through the interference like sunrise through storm clouds. Dispatch, we've got visual on the children. Repeat, we have visual contact. Claire's breath caught somewhere between lungs and her throat. 2 children, approximately 8 and 6 years old, conscious and responsive, came the update, passing them through the window to the ladder company now. The sound that came through Claire's headset next was one she would remember for the rest of her life. The faint but unmistakable sound of children crying, not the terrified screams of panic, but the exhausted, relieved sobs of fear finally ending. Dispatch, this is EMS, crackled through her headset. 2 pediatric patients were received from the latter company. Vital stable, minor smoke inhalation, transport to General Hospital for evaluation. Claire's hand pressed against her mouth as relief flooded through her system like warm water. Her voice, when she managed to speak, was barely above a whisper. Copy EMS. 2 children recovered and were transported. But even as she said those words, even as the immediate crisis began to wind down, a terrifying thought pierced through her relief like a cold blade. What if the next address had been hers? What if she'd had to guide firefighters through her own home to save her own children while she sat helpless miles away? The radio crackled with final updates. Fire contained, scene secured, crews beginning to pack up their equipment, but Claire remained frozen in her chair, staring at the address on her screen and wondering if she would be able to forget how close disaster had come to her own front door. The fire was contained, but Claire didn't leave the dispatch center until nearly dawn. She sat at her console, her hands still trembling as she typed, and with every flicker of the screen, she saw flames reflected in her own children's windows. The acrid smell of smoke lingered as she walked to her car. Every house she passed on the drive home now seemed fragile. Her own house stood untouched. The front porch light was on. Maria's car was in the driveway, and everything appeared perfectly normal. Yet, as Claire sat in her car, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She found Maria asleep on the living room couch. The babysitter stared as Claire quietly closed the front door. How did it go? Maria whispered. Everyone's safe, Claire replied, the only answer that mattered. After Maria left, Claire climbed the stairs, her legs heavy. She pushed open the door to Tommy's room, watching her 8-year-old son sleep, his chest rising and falling into complete abandonment of deep sleep. Next, she checked on Emma, curled up like a small coma under her comforter. Claire gently brushed a strand of hair away from her daughter's face, marveling at the soft warmth of her skin. Finally, she checked on Sophia in the nursery, clutching her stuffed elephant with her thumb in her mouth. Claire adjusted Sophia's blanket and stood there in the early morning silence, overwhelmed by a sudden, terrible gratitude. She didn't go on her own room. Instead, she went back downstairs and sat at her kitchen table, still in her uniform, watching the sun come up. From there, she could see the empty lot where the Lopez house used to be. the blackened beams and a pile of debris that had once been a home. Claire was still sitting there when her children woke up 2 hours later, tumbling downstairs in their pajamas like a small sleepy parade. "Mommy!" Sophia launched herself into Claire's arms. "You're home. I missed you," Claire whispered, holding her daughter tight enough to make her squirm in protest. Tommy and Emma climbed into chairs, immediately launching into chatter about the movie they'd watched and the smoke they'd seen from Tommy's window. There were lots of fire trucks, Emma announced importantly. Maria said there was a fire, but everyone was okay. Claire nodded, her voice steady now. Yes, everyone is okay. She made them pancakes from scratch and listened to their stories, marveling at how normal everything felt when just hours before, normal had seemed like something she might never experience again. The call came that afternoon when the children were napping. "Claire, it's Janet," the day shift supervisor said. "The Lopez family wanted to thank you personally. They're here at the center with the kids. They wanted to meet the woman who helped save their children." Claire's throat tightened. "That's not necessary. I was just doing my job." "Claire," Janet's voice was gentle but firm. "This wasn't just doing your job. What you did last night, staying in that call when it was your own neighborhood, your own street, that was courage." An hour later, Claire found herself walking into the dispatch center with Sophia on her hip and Tommy and Emma at her side. The moment she walked through the door, the day shift fell silent. Then, one by one, every dispatcher and supervisor rose to their feet. Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Please don't." "You stayed," Janet said simply, cutting off her protest. "When it was personal, when it was your own neighborhood, you stayed and did your job. That's not something we see every day." The Lopez family was waiting in the break room, parents and two children who looked impossibly small in the harsh fluorescent lighting. The moment Mrs. Lopez saw Claire, she burst into tears. "You saved them," she whispered, pulling Claire to a fierce hug. "You saved my babies." The Lopez children, 8-year-old Miguel and 6-year-old Isabella, hung back shyly until their mother encouraged them forward. They had drawings of fire trucks and people in headsets, with the words "Thank you" written in unsteady block letters. "We made this for you," Miguel said quietly, holding out his drawing. Isabella's picture showed a stick figure with yellow hair. "That's you," she pointed. "You talked to the fire people." Claire knelt down to their eye level, accepting the drawings. "You two were very brave last night." "Were you scared?" Isabella asked with a directness that only children possesses. Claire looked into the little girl's eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "I was scared too, but being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. Being scared just means you care about what happens." Later, after the Lopez family had left, Claire sat in the parking lot and stared at the building where she'd worked for 6 years. It looked the same, but something fundamental had changed. She had always known her job mattered, but she'd never understood the weight of that responsibility until it landed on her own doorstep. As she drove home, Claire saw her reflection in the rear-view mirror. She looked tired, older, but there was a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. She'd been tested and had proven that when it mattered most, she could be counted on to stay. Home wasn't just a place her children slept safely. It was the thing she protected every time she put on her headset and became the voice that guided help through the darkness. 6 months later, Claire was working a quiet Tuesday evening shift when Janet approached her console. "There's a group of fourth graders here for a field trip," Janet said, gesturing towards the lobby. "Their teacher said one of the kids told everyone you're a hero." Claire looked up, confused. "Which kid?" Janet pointed to a girl with long dark hair in a bright red dress. It was Isabella Lopez. She looked older, but Claire would have recognized her anywhere. The presentation was unlike any Claire had ever given. The children didn't ask about high-speed chases or dramatic rescues. Instead, a boy asked, "How do you stay calm when people are scared?" A girl asked, "What do you do when you're scared too?" Claire found herself talking about the weight of responsibility and the balance between duty and fear. She explained that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. When the presentation ended, Isabella stayed behind. "Miss Claire," she said quietly, "I dreamed that you weren't there that night." Nobody answered when Daddy called for help. Claire knelt down. "What do you think about when I get scared?" she asked. Isabella shook her head. "I think about all the people who depend on me. People like you and your family. That helps me remember that caring makes me stronger." Isabella considered this with a serious expression. "So, being scared can make you stronger?" "Sometimes," Claire said, "when you use it the right way." 3 weeks later, a package arrived at the dispatch center. Inside was a class book titled "Our Community Heroes." The page that made Claire's eyes fill with unexpected tears showed a stick figure at a desk, with a headset and a determined expression. The caption, in Isabella's handwriting, read, "This is Miss Claire. She saved my family when our house was on fire. She showed me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you help people even when you're scared. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just have a steady voice and a caring heart." The page was photocopied and posted on the break room bulletin board where it stayed for years. New dispatchers would ask about it, and veterans would tell the story of a night when one of their own guided a rescue on her own streets. The story became part of the center's training program, a reminder that their job was about being the calm voice in someone else's storm. Claire was promoted to training supervisor years later. She would end each recruit orientation with the same words: "Emergency services isn't about being fearless. It's about being reliable when fear tries to make you unreliable." That's what it means to be human at your very best. Everyday heroes are all around us.